Corinna, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Hey, Brianne. Thank you. I'm excited to be on.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I came across your name, who you are, from the Reinforced Running podcast, and I just felt what you had to talk about is super important for people to hear. We're going to go a little different direction than what you did on there, but I feel like your background and everything is kind of parallels mine quite a bit, especially coming out of high school and knowing what you wanted to do for the most point and everything. And then that brought you all to where you are today. So before we could dive into the actual topics, let's just talk about you a little bit. Who are you?
That's a great question, loaded question. But yeah, I think there's so many. I mean, I am so grateful for all the different experiences I've had, over my past, gosh, almost 29 years now. And so it's cool to see the direction that my life has taken, and looking back, all the different things and people and organizations that have helped get me here and shape me into the person I am. So um, gosh, in terms of who I am now, I am a registered dietitian and athlete, and just someone who has a lot of love for life and fitness and health and nutrition, and loving, our loving ourselves and finding, our capabilities and pushing ourselves to our limits and being uncomfortable and finding joy in some of those moments of discomfort and leaning into that. And I'm someone who loves a good challenge. So I guess that's in a nutshell some of the things maybe about who I am.
I think the love's a good challenge kind of sums up everything you're involved in. You are a CrossFit athlete, an obstacle course racer. You are now doing a lot of the tactical games and that sort of thing. How has what you've done as an athlete really like reinforce what you're doing as a dietitian with your athletes?
Yeah, I think this has been a journey that I've been on personally, and so I'm at a point where I can relate to a lot of the athletes that I help on the nutrition front. But for me, like, getting into nutrition was really kind of a selfish pursuit at first for me, because I was a multi-sport athlete, and the thought of studying something that could be so applicable to myself in the nutrition field of like, yeah, how do I eat better for health? And then later that became for performance. But these are all things that I was curious about for my own application. And then I went to Virginia Tech, and there was a major that was human nutrition, food, and exercise. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Like, sign me up. I remember just running through the list of, I had gotten accepted to Virginia Tech, and I had no clue what I really like. I knew what I was interested in, but I didn't know like what I wanted to major in. So I scanned that list, and like that totally stuck out to me. I was like, yes, that is 100% what I want to, the area I want to go into. And and so yeah, at first I was playing club lacrosse. I got into club triathlon. I discovered obstacle course racing and CrossFit, like all in that 4-year period of college. And so a lot of those 4 years were taking what I was learning from the textbooks and in my classes, nutrition wise, and learning to apply it personally throughout these different endeavors with athletics. And so I definitely had some really embarrassing moments where, looking back, I'm like, wow, that was a terrible nutrition strategy, or that was a very, that, I think one of, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I just got my specialty certification in, or I passed my specialty exam in sports dietetics. So I am technically am a sports dietitian now, and there's specific criteria for that. But I think it's so important that even as a registered dietitian, that doesn't mean you can have a very good understanding and knowledge of nutrition for general health and wellness, but to cater to athletes and the increased demands, nutrition demands and needs, for individuals who are training for something specifically, and have a much greater expenditure throughout their day through exercise. Like, that's that's definitely a different area, and it requires additional considerations and knowledge. And so I look back to my initial schooling, it was just like general nutrition, and I was trying to apply a lot of those principles to myself as an athlete when I really needed more sport specific nutrition application to those scenarios. And so looking back, I can't help but cut myself a little bit of slack because I didn't know, the sports nutrition side of some of those nutrition concepts. And so it looks different, but yeah, definitely applied and had a lot of failed application or failed attempts for certain things. I think back to like my first world championship race for the Spartan Race World Championship in 2014. And my fueling strategy was atrocious. And I came in second in that event by like a little over 2 minutes. And it was a 4.5 hour long ordeal. And so I can't help but think about my, if I had adopted a better fueling plan or just a fueling plan, how different that outcome could have been. So that's one of the things I always reminisce on.
It's so funny to look back, because I mean, I've been a physical therapist now for 16 years, I think. And just thinking like what I used to do and what I do now, I'm just like, wow. Like,
Yeah.
so many things that I was like, why? Like, I understand it's like we all have to start somewhere. We learn things over the years, but yeah, some of the things like just wow.
I think you have a greater sense of appreciation for like how far you've come in those moments. You're like, okay, I'm not gonna be too hard on myself then, but I'm just very grateful for what I know now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let's dive into your story a little bit deeper. Once you got done with your sports dietetics, started kind of really learning, or even in the process of that, really started learning like the differences between sports and just being healthy and nutrition just for a general well-being. What are some of the big differences that you started to notice, or changes you started making yourself, or just things that you really like, wow, like I need to start doing this with my athletes?
Yeah, I think an awareness of just how much fuel we need to support a very active lifestyle and training regimen is something that I had to experience kind of firsthand in my own fueling strategies, but then also with all the clients I work with, or I'd say for the majority of the clients I work with, under fueling is a huge common theme. And so it's helping my athletes understand, what their needs and what their fueling requirements are, but then also helping them to feel what that's like and never wanting to go back to where they were beforehand, because they just realized, wow, this is how I can feel like, and I have all the control of that in terms of, what I prepare and put into my body. And then, but I think until you can experience that, sometimes it's really hard to know, what you're capable of achieving athletically when you have the right nutrition on hand. And so I'd say, just in a very general sense, under fueling is probably one of the biggest things I see. And it's hard because I think there's so much nowadays, there's so much aesthetics involved in sport, and people thinking they should look a certain way in order to perform a certain way. And there's there's very little correlation with, how you look and whether you a six pack or not, and your ability to perform or run fast or, lift a certain weight. And so I think that, with social media these days and everyone, and that being an ideal a lot of people are chasing, that can be have a pretty negative influence with, especially in the athletic realm. And so it's helping to educate individuals on like what's going to help them achieve their goals. And oftentimes it's not losing weight and trying to magically get these six-pack abs, at the same time, or even if that's probably not even a goal that they should be chasing after. And so helping walk through that patiently with my athletes and the individuals I work with.
Yeah. And it can be tough, I think, because, we go through our, I don't know, teens, 20s, and hearing like these low numbers of how many calories I should be intaking and all of this. And all of a sudden then you still have this number in your head. And so you start training harder, you start doing more. And you don't even consider the fact that like maybe I need to eat more. And then when you're told this, at least this is what I've heard from or see from people, it's like deer in the headlights when they see this number of like, I need to eat how much?
Mhm. It's like, well, it's like when you see Instagram stories or reels of like a day in the life, and it's like, here's how much I eat. And it's like, that's none of anyone's business to really share that, when I try to post some helpful information around like food prep on my Instagram account and stuff. But I'm really mindful of like, the moment you put like measurements in terms of, how big or small a meal should be, it's like, people take those things so literally into heart. It's like, your needs are going to be completely your own and dependent on so many different factors that are unique to you and should be personalized. And so, yeah, like, what someone else shows as their day in the life is not something to base it off of. And also when you said like we tend to compare to what maybe our needs were years ago, I think also people tend to do that for their weight as well. I'll be working with a middle-aged individual who, is recreationally active and might be doing some races or events here and there. And he or she is trying to achieve, also wants to lose weight or lose fat. And, they're trying to achieve a body weight goal that, they haven't been at since they were, graduated high school. So it's like, let's be realistic. Let's with these goals and not trying to be the person we were, many years ago, especially if that was, a different phase of life, a different phase of training. Like, I think we need to step away from the numbers and be a little bit more in tune with our bodies and use our body signaling as a way to gauge like, oh, I'm still hungry, I need to eat more, or oh, I'm full, I'm good, like I'm satisfied. That's probably an appropriate amount. And so many people like, how much should I eat? And it's like, well, do you when you eat this, this meal, like obviously we can get into the specifics of composition of it in order to make it a more satisfying meal and make sure there's protein and carbs and fat and they're distributed in a way that sets you up for, whatever you're looking to get into next, whether that's like an activity or training session or you're just at work. But also like base it off of how you feel. Like if you're left still hungry, well, the point of eating is to, is to nourish and satisfy and, and provide energy. And so if you're not getting that or in that a sufficient quantity, then we have to increase that. But I think people are really scared to like, they don't know, they're scared to trust themselves. They don't know how to do that.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, and maybe I'm just speaking from personal experience, like we don't realize sometimes how intense a workout might be and how much we may have really burned that day. Cause there's some days that I'm like, I know how much I've eaten. Like I keep track because I know it's easy for me to undereat because of how much food I need. And there's some days I'm like, I'm well at like where I should be. I'm like, I'm still hungry. Like I need more food.
Well, and we can't account, all the fitness trackers in the world can't account for, they might somewhat inaccurately estimate, the amount of calorie burn from a single workout session. But what they can account for is the increased calorie burn, especially from strength training in the 24-hour period beyond, that session. And so it's just, I think that there are individuals out there who, might go off of MyFitnessPal caloric estimations and then they submit their exercise activity. And so if they burn 400 calories, it adds another 400 calories. And I think that's just a can be a really detrimental way to looking at nutrition and exercise, because it brings about this thinking and this approach to food as like, okay, it's really like you got to earn your food. Like, oh, I don't deserve to eat this because I didn't work out hard enough. It's like, we all deserve to eat and nourish our bodies. Even if you're not doing anything in a given day, you still have nutrient needs. You still have caloric needs. And, so I think that can just be a really harmful approach to looking at food and exercise.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense there. When working with or just kind of thinking about like how much food we need, like for performance side of things. But also like, it's hard to break out of that mindset of, but I want to be lean. I don't want to be putting on weight. Even if your goal is to put on muscle, you don't want to be putting on fat. Like, how do you help people really like break down some of that mindset stuff that comes along with like we're increasing your calories so you can put on muscle, and break past that like fear of gaining weight that may have been with them their entire lives based on whatever sport they were in?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about doing one-on-one coaching and working with individuals. Um, just the two of us is that it allows us to closely monitor. And again, the strategy is going to look different for everyone. So, if, I'm working with someone who has a previous history of disordered eating tendencies or full-blown eating disorder. Obviously, like the food tracking and like and day-to-day monitoring of nutrition is likely not going to is going to be a very different approach, and that will likely not be part of that plan. But for someone without that kind of background, it's I think closely monitoring how they're feeling, but like their intake, their distribution of macronutrients, of course, which can make us feel a lot and feel and perform a lot different throughout our day, depending on whether we're having a sufficient amount of carbohydrates, or or instead we're trying to implement some sort of high fat or low carb strategy, or just eating sufficient amount of protein. But I think monitoring not only intake, but then also like how you feel with it. Where's your hunger at on a scale of 1 to 10? What's your energy like? How has your sleep been? How what workouts did you do or not do? And I take all of that into account with an individual, so that we have that laid out, so that if and sometimes weigh-ins can be helpful with that in terms of seeing are we trending up or down. But I think take into account like, yeah, how is this individual feeling in their workouts and performing, and monitoring all the other nutrition things. We can see if weight's increasing, but also proficiency in your workouts, and you're feeling amazing, well, it's likely that maybe a little bit of a bump in calories can lead to benefits, improvements in performance, which can then therefore in the long run reduce body fat mass. And so, and maybe that's less of a scale thing. Maybe it's more of like a body composition, or like progress pics, or a combination of using the scale, body composition photos. If you like, there's a lot of clients who can, like, I can tell I'm changing just by how I feel and how my clothes fit, but the weights, the scale's not changing. I think it's just important. It's not always, it's so important not to get caught up in that number on the scale. And I kind of hate that as like a primary tracking method for a lot of people. But I think we just don't really know. To kind of answer your question more specifically, I think I think people think that they know what they eat on a daily basis, but unless you're like writing it out in a food diary, or perhaps you're using an app to track it, even if it's just for a handful of days, I think a lot of people are pretty much hands down, all my clients that I work with, unless they've been doing it consistently beforehand, they're like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize that there's a huge gap between lunch and dinner, and I'm not eating anything in there, and my workout's in the middle of there, and I'm not fueling or recovering. And like I didn't see that until I actually went through this exercise. And so I think like that awareness piece can really draw a lot of light into whether calories should decrease or increase, or we need to adjust, or the timing just needs to adjust. So I think there's a lot of different approaches to take in order to understand what your needs are, and to meet your goals, whether they're performance or, composition oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, I think it's hard because we do watch, elite athletes, and it's like, oh, like you kind of mentioned us already. It's like they have the 6-pack abs and they have all of this. And I think it's important to remember, or just talk about that. It's like everyone is going to perform their best at a different composition. Like I was just talking with a guy I work out with, and it's like, we both know, like we're never going to have that like super toned look, because we know our body comp has to be just a little bit higher for us to perform better. Like both of us have dropped lower before and it did not go well. And so I think it's important just to understand that everyone's going to be a little bit different based on, they're going to perform a little bit different based on that composition too.
And genetics has a huge, plays a huge role in that. It's like, okay, sure, we could get, you could achieve the 6-pack abs, but at what cost, right? Like, oh, if that means I have, you're trying to ask your body to perform at its highest level, but you're not giving it the energy to literally perform that work. But you're lean enough, or you can see some abs. Like, is that doing that? And that's where I really like to focus in on, like, okay, what is this individual's primary goals? And like, is it more important for you to, look a certain way, or are you really trying to perform and, like, win this race, or you're trying to do this, compete in this, in this event? And so, and then I find that the aesthetic goals don't have a lot of sustenance behind them. It's like, okay, well, like, okay, for what? Like, oh, just feel better about myself. It's like, okay, well, that's probably pointing to something a little bit deeper than, than your lack of a 6-pack. It's probably more about, we can probably develop this your relationship with your body, and the way you view food coming into your body, and like, and so there's like a lot more we could focus on to help you get to a better place than the check box of having abs or not. So yeah, I definitely, I think there's so much more there than, than what we see on Instagram and social media. And there's so many people that are completely miserable. We don't know the backstory. It's like, well, you see a lot of photos of people from, maybe in their bikini or physique competitions. And so they just, a bunch of photos where they're super low body fat. And it's like, well, they've held on to that for a micro portion of their year. And then the rest of the year looks very different. And it comes with a lot of sacrifice and a lot of, in a lot of situations where they've just been completely miserable and unhappy and not a lot of energy to do much of else in their day. And so, I think we just don't get that whole backstory all too often. And it can be really harmful for people thinking that that's just, they're living their best life.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive in a little bit deeper with things. And I know everyone's going to be a little bit different, but as a general, for someone who wants to perform well, like macronutrient wise, is there certain, I don't want to say like everyone needs to be following a certain like macro breakdown or anything, but are there like any kind of just very general things that we can look at as far as like when we're planning our meals and snacks out?
Yeah. A couple things come to mind, like when, with that question. I think the first thing is just to address it. Like, I think for the majority of sports out there, carbohydrates are the primary fueling source. So, there's very few, if you understand energy systems, you realize that for the majority of sports, other than maybe ultra distance, like running or ultra events in other capacities, like where you might be performing at a, less than 60% of your VO2 max on a very, for hours on end, where fat utilization is probably is going to predominate, then carbohydrates are an essential part of, is an essential part of the fueling process. So that's first things first. And so when you're making like snacks and foods throughout the day, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about, just like low carb this, low carb that, and trying to limit carbohydrates. But if you're an athlete, like that's something that always needs to be, have a presence throughout your day. And, I think when it comes to snacks, like I think for a lot of individuals, those snacks, for a lot of the athletes I work with, snacks come kind of before workout or after workout, or
You froze on me, Corrina.
And so it's important to think
Back
about,
it
okay,
up
well,
for
out
a
of the snack,
second.
what am I trying to gain out of the snack? You
Bro,
might, your snack,
temporarily.
oh, you hear me? Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Am I back though?
You are back. Let's go back to kind of where you started as far as like talking about snacks.
Okay. So when you have snacks throughout the day, depending on, if you're your average Joe just at work and you get hungry middle of the morning between breakfast and lunch, then your snack considerations are going to be different than, an athlete per se, who is having a snack leading up to their workout session. And so, a good rule of thumb is combining macronutrients. So, instead of just having a snack that's all carbohydrates or all fat or all protein, it's combining, two or more of those. So like having something with protein and carbs, or something with fat and protein, or carbs and protein, or fat and carbs. Like, so just something where it's going to, be a little bit more satiating. Oftentimes when it's just one of those areas, there's not as much variety, and it's also just going to leave you feeling, I don't know if you've ever just had just straight up like a cracker, right? Some crackers, you could eat crackers all day as a snack and like not really feel satisfied. That cheese and crackers, or like, some meat and crackers, or some fruit and crackers, like it's gonna be different. So fiber and protein are going to be two elements to a snack that are important as well. So fiber is going to keep us feeling fuller for longer. You're going to get those from your whole grains, your fruits and vegetables. Protein is the most satisfying or satiating of all the different macronutrients, and we tend to I think a lot of individuals, while there's a lot of hype around protein, so maybe it's not as challenging for some people, I do find that a lot of individuals struggle with hitting, their protein goals throughout the day. So that's like, for me, that's something I try to implement when I'm eating snacks, so that I try to have a little bit of protein involved, so that I can make sure I'm hitting my target goals for the day. But I think too, like, so if you're an athlete or an active individual looking to have a snack leading up to a training session, then you want to think about, what the intent of that snack is. That snack is going to be your closest fuel source to your workout. And so you want it to, you want to prioritize the main substrate or the fuel source that you're going to be utilizing in that session. So for most of us, especially if we're doing any type of workout above 60% of our VO2 max, or if you think about, an RPE of 6 out of 10, it's probably going to be around that amount. So we're going to be utilizing mostly carbohydrates. So, whether that's, and we also want something that's going to digest fairly quickly. We don't want, a whole lot of fat in our stomachs as a snack, leading into a workout, because it's probably not going to digest very quickly. So, quick carbohydrate sources are going to be great for leading into those workout sessions. But, if you're just sitting at work, then, a slower digesting carbohydrate snack option would be a better choice, so that you're not just getting that quick blood sugar spike, and then, and then that blood sugar falling back down, and then you're hungry again for more. You feel a little bit of like an energy spike and then a crash. So I don't know if that was helpful in answering your question, but kind of there's a lot of factors to consider depending on, what you're, when you're eating, and in the context of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of going a little bit deeper into the carb part, and you kind of touched on as far as your slow burning and fast burning, but like when we're talking just actual foods, like what sort of things are more of your short-lived ones that we want to do before workout versus your longer-lived ones that you might want to do more during the day?
Yeah, so this is kind of a question about like complex versus simple carbohydrates. I think a lot of times we think of like simple carbs as they often get the rap of like bad carbs, because those are going to be things that are oftentimes high in sugar. They can be high in sugar. So a couple examples would be like soda or sugar or lemonade or juices, so sugar sweetened beverages, or like a candy is definitely a simple sugar, simple carb. And this just means that your body doesn't require as much work for your body to break down. so when food doesn't take as long to break down, it's available, its energy is available for use very quickly. And then if it's not going to be put to use, then it's going to be stored. And that whole process is pretty efficient and pretty quick. So you can imagine that if you're just at work throughout the day and you're eating some candy and, you're just sitting at your desk, well, that's going to cause, a pretty high spike in blood sugar. And then, might have a little bit of a dip, depending on how much you consume. And then because you're probably not utilizing that energy for much, sitting at your desk for the next couple hours, then it's going to be stored. And then if that's in excess of your calorie needs for the day, then, that will be stored as fat. But for an individual who's about to work out, like those quicker sources of carbohydrates are really important to get into the body for quick fuel. So it really it really depends on the context of, when those carbohydrates are consumed. And it's also like, eating, if you had a packet of Skittles, let's say, and you consumed it with other foods, like that's going to have a different effect than just eating Skittles by itself, where there's no other food around it to slow the digestion and absorption process. Now, of course, other simple carbs that aren't candy or, sugary, like added, foods that are, or drinks that have a bunch of added sugar, can be like, dried fruit, or like yogurt could be, especially with fruit flavored yogurts, honey, like any type of enriched or like bread products that's not a whole grain. So, just like your white flour products and bread products or crackers, or so those are other options as well. And so like for me, a good example of like a pre-workout simple carbohydrate might be, having a piece of like a graham cracker, right? So graham crackers are great quick fuel source. They're not going to take very long to digest, I think, unless it's, for the most part, like so graham cracker, or like a piece of white bread with peanut butter and jelly on it, and it doesn't mean it has to be, like a whole grain bread is going to take that much longer to digest. But these are just ideas to think about, like, okay, how soon is my workout? Or how soon do I need this fuel? And, how long is my food choice going to take to digest? You want to make sure that you're not picking a very long digesting fuel source when you need it, when you're going to work out or need that energy in a short period of time. Fruit is one of those things where, something like berries, which have a lot of fiber and don't have a ton of carbohydrates, are going to be different than a banana that has, quite a bit of carbohydrates. It's like the carbohydrate to sugar ratio is a little bit larger for something like a banana than it is for berries. So if you're looking for a quick fuel source before a workout, banana is going to be probably a better fuel choice, or better choice than, something that's very fibrous and has, less carbohydrates to contribute. So fruit can be one of those things where they can play on the complex carbohydrate side of things, but also, they have simple carbohydrate properties. But anything with whole grains, like starchy vegetables, high fiber fruit, the more fibrous oftentimes is going to be more complex. It's going to take our bodies longer to break down.
That makes sense. Well, cool. Well, I know we need to be wrapping things up for you to get to the rest of your clients this afternoon. What are just maybe 2 or 3 just simple takeaways for people who know they need to, or know they want to do something to perform better and aren't sure where to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think identifying your goals and your why behind your goals can help you figure out, what steps you need to take to achieve them. So many people come to me and they're like, I want to perform better. And I want to, I'm really trying to prepare for this event. And I also want to lose weight, or I want to lose fat. And so I think it's important to be like, okay, well, which one is your priority, right? Because it's going to be very challenging to achieve both of those, or probably impossible, honestly, to achieve both of those to the utmost degree when, simultaneously. So picking, choosing picking your goals, but also understanding like what the why behind your goals. Okay, I want to lose weight. Okay, well, why do you want to lose weight? And like digging deeper so that, when the motivation isn't always there, you have a bigger underlying factor that is driving you to want to accomplish that goal. Maybe it's to set a better example for your kids, or so that you can keep up with your kids, or maybe it's to have more energy to give to the people in your life that matter most to you. So I think it's like identifying what those goals are and your primary goal, and then helping build an action plan toward that goal. And oftentimes like working with a dietitian can be really helpful in identifying what those action items might look like, and then how to apply them to your own nutrition plan. But I think people think that they just have to do this all by themselves, and the reality is like, I'm not a PT, so I wouldn't know what to do. That's not my realm. So I'm going to go out and get expertise from someone who can help me accomplish those goals. And so same with like, that's what the dietitians are here for, to help individuals outline a nutrition plan, a nutrition strategy to help them. And it's can be overwhelming or daunting to think about doing solo. Another thing, kind of like what we talked about with wrapping up, like if you don't know what your nutrition intake looks like over the course of the day, I challenge you to write it out on, in a notebook, and just with times and like what you ate, and to be able to, at the end of the day, kind of stand back and look at it from a bird's eye view of like, oh, wow, like in looking at this now on paper in front of me, I realized that that's, maybe you just know right off the bat, that's not a lot of fuel, or like, wow, I probably need to eat more than that, or I need to fill the gaps of time a little bit better, or, because my performance hasn't been great. And then that leads me to like my third suggestion would just be, start to become a little bit more in tune to your body and the signals and the signs that it's giving you, especially if you're someone who has performance goals. And, like a lot of your goals are asking your body to do certain things. Like if you're asking a lot, there's a lot of demands on your body, but you're not being receptive to feedback, then you're missing out on a very valuable aspect of understanding what your needs are. So quieting the noise a little bit, not getting so caught up in the gadgets and the tracking devices that tell us everything, but more so like, well, how do I feel? What's, how's my, like, am I achy? Am I really sore? Am I, or do I feel amazing? Am I like bouncing off the walls? Am I hungry? Am I not? Like, I think we've just lost a lot of touch with ourselves and our bodies over, the years, and technology doesn't always help with that. So finding some time to quiet that and really, really listen.
Awesome. I love that last statement there.
Yeah.
So many aspects in life can be improved that way.
Yes, agreed.
Awesome. Well, Corrina, thank you so much for your time today. If someone wants to follow you, reach out to you, has questions, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I'm probably most active on my Instagram account. So CS Coffin 13 is my Instagram handle. So feel free to message me there. I try to get back to everyone and all message requests. But I also have a website, www.theRDathlete.com. And if you are looking for some nutrition coaching, I do offer one-on-one programs, as well as I'll be launching a group coaching program here shortly. So if that's of interest, you can apply to you can submit an application, and I will get back to you shortly with that. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brianne. I appreciate it.